We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara from Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 5a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was dealing with a machlokas amoraim in terms of a case of halach. The case of halach again is basically a case of modib and mixas, where a person admits to part of what is being claimed, but even the part that the person is admitting to, it's right here in front of us. He essentially says halach. He says take what is yours. There's a question whether that's considered like a classic case of modib and mixas and there's a shvua, or is that not considered modib and mixas and there's no shvua? And so the Gemara now continues and asks, Ulamando Amar Halach Pater. Now, according to the one who says that by Halach is Pater from a shvua, it's not considered modib mixas. So, Amai Itzrich Kro Lemute Karka Mishvua. Why do we ever need a pasuk to exclude land from a shvua? Hakol Karka Halachu. Anytime a person admits to land, it's essentially a case of Halach. The person is saying, take what is right here in front of us. The land isn't going anywhere. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Lach, he'll say to you, Itzrich Kra, the pasuk actually is needed. Hechad Dechafar Ba Boro Shichin Amaris. For example, in a situation where he dug pits, where he dug cisterns, where he dug caves, he dug up the land. As Rashi says, V'chafar Ba Boro Shichin Amaris Delav Halach. Over there, he can't say Halach, Sharei Kilkala, because essentially in that case he ruined the land. So you can have a case of land which is not Halach in that fashion. Inami or Hechad Datanu Kalim V'karkos V'hoda B'kalim V'kafar B'karkos. Or you can have another scenario. Let's say the claim against him was kalim and karka, vessels and land, and then he admitted on the kalim, but he denied the karkos, so it's not halach there because he's admitting on the kalim, he's not admitting on the karka, but it is a case that involves karka, and so therefore there's no shvua since the case involves karka. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come in here the following proof. The Tani Rami Bar Chama, because Rami Bar Chama taught, Arba Shomrim, when it comes to the four Shomrim, we know there's a concept of Shvua Shomrim, that a Shomer takes a Shvua in a situation where he's making some claim that he's not responsible. And Rami Bar Chama has a unique shita. He says that when it comes to the four Shomrim and they take a Shvua, Tzrichin Kfira b'mixas v'hoda b'mixas, it also needs to be a situation essentially of Moda b'mixas. They need to deny part of it, but they need to admit to part of it, and that applies to Shomer Chinam v'ashoel no se sachar Socher, that applies to all four shomrim. A shomer chinam is a shomer who watches for free. A shoel is a borrower. A nosei sacher is one who watches and he gets paid for it. And a socher is a renter. And Rashi explains Dalit Shomrim when it comes to the four Shomrim, Shavua ha'amura b'hen, meaning the Shavua that is said by the Dalit Shomrim. B'shomer chinam, for example, by a Shomer chinam shenigneva heimenu, he makes a Shavua. Let's say he's claiming that it was stolen from him. A Shomer chinam is not responsible for theft. B'shomer sacher shenensa, Shomer sacher would make a Shavua that it was an onus, that it was an accident. He's not responsible for onus. Uv'shoel shemesa machmas malacha, by a Shoel, he's going to take a Shavua that it was mesa machmas malacha, that it died while it was doing work. He's not responsible for that. You have various examples of shvuos by shomrim. So again, Rami Bar Chama has a unique shita that tzrichin kfira b'mixas v'hoda b'mixas, that you need to have moda b'mixas essentially in that case. Kfira lo have ela b'kofer mamish. Now what does it mean kfira? That means he totally denies. O lo hayu devarim me'olam, he says never happened. O echzarti locher, he says I returned it to you. And hoda lo have elim kein hoda mamish. What's hoda? Hoda means that he actually admits sheyesh lo biyadu shechayev lahachzer lo, that he has it and he has to return it to him. Nimsa she'ein chiyav shvuas shomrim ba ela im kein toan. So it comes out that you're not going to have a shvua by a case of shomer unless you have a situation where the person claims shalosh paros. Essentially, the person has to claim 3 cows. Ba'achas kafar, one of them is a denial. You have to have kfir b'mixas. Uvi'achas hodalo, and then one of them he admits sheyeshna biyado, that it's actually in his possession. That's the hodah. Vashalishis, and then on the third one, Omer lo nen, so then he's going to make one of these claims which requires a shvua. He either says there was an ones, or shomer chinam hu, Omer lo b'shlishis nigneva, let's say he's a shomer chinam, then on the third one he's going to say nigneva. The point of Rashi over here is it's not enough just to have moda b'mixas, you actually have to have moda b'mixas, you have to have kfira b'mixas, which Rashi defines as kofer mamish, and then you have to have a third cow where you're going to make one of these kind of claims. Again, shomer chinam, let's say nigneva, to chayev ala shvua, that's the kind of claim is chayev shvua. Amura b'parsha, that's the shvua that's stated in the parsha. Shalosh shalach yadu b'melachas re'ehu, that he didn't actually use what was given over to him. The ilu shvua to kfira einzu shvua hamur b'shomrim, because if you're going to talk about the shvua of the denial, that's not shvua shomrim. Shvua shomrim specifically is this idea of shalosh shalach yadu. Again, let's say of a shomer chinam that's claiming that it's stolen, he has to take the shvua that he didn't misappropriate what was given to him. And Rashi continues, uvalav kfira nami, and without a denial also lo techayve shvua shomrim, there is no shvua shomrim. Techsib b'shomer Chinam ki huzeh, because the pasuk of ki huzeh, which is the pasuk of Moda b'mixas, is written by Shomer Chinam, d'minan nafkalon, shemoda b'mixas v'kafar b'mixas. That's where we learn out this idea of Moda b'mixas and kafar b'mixas. Now that's again the unique shita of Rami Bar Chama, and Rashi points out, ulafuke miman domer b'Bava Kama b'Hagozal Kama. Now this comes to go against the shita in Bava Kama in Perak Hagozal Kama, Eruv Parshios Kasav Kan. There is a shita that says, no, there's a mixing up of Parshios over here, meaning the idea of Moda b'mixas, it is written in this parsha, but it doesn't really belong here. It's its own separate parsha. There's no concept of Moda b'mixas by Shvuah Shomrim. V'chi ksiv ki huzeh, when it says ki huzeh, which is the pasuk of Moda b'mixas, lava shomer chinam dechsiv gabe koi. It's not going on shomer chinam, even though it's written over there. Ella im kesef talva, rather it's just going on the case of a loan. V'yashminan haitana de v'shomrim nami bo'inan kfira v'hoda, and so that's why this Tan over here is teaching that no, by shomrim you're required to have this denial and this admission, kfira b'mixas, hoda b'mixas, v'ashvura ha'amura b'parashal parashlishas, and the shvur, the oath that's being taken is on that third cow. And so the Gemara continues, hey chidami, so what exactly is the case if you're admitting by one of the cows in all of these cases you have kfira b'mixas and hoda b'mixas? What is the nature of that admission? Lav da amar lehelach, isn't it exactly the case we're talking about? It's a case of helach, and apparently that's considered to be moda b'mixas. And Rashi says, hey chidami parashal hoda, again, how do you have a case where you're admitting to the cow, lav de kaima kamon v'yamar le kechena b'chol makom shehid, hainu helach, isn't it right in front of us? And he says, take it wherever it is, that's a case of helach. And the Gemara responds, lo, no, it doesn't necessarily have to be a case of Halach, rather it could be as follows. The Amar Lei says to him, Gimel Paros Masarti Lach, he says, I gave you 3 cows. V'mesu kula b'pshia. Now the claim is they all died in negligence, you owe me all of them. V'yamar Leiyu chada lo hayu dvarim me'olam, and he says back, one of them it never happened, you never lent me one of them. V'chada mesa bonus, and one of them died by accident, I'm not responsible. V'chada mesa b'pshia, and the other one died with negligence, now it's not a case of Halach, but he is saying he's responsible, that's Moed v'mixas. V'ina shlumei, I do need to pay you because it died with negligence, the lav helachu, and that would not necessarily be a case of helach. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come in here the following proof. The Tani Avua de Rabbi Toriki, that the father of Rabbi Toriki taught, Lid Rabbi Chia Kamaisa. This is relevant to the first teaching of Rabbi Chia. Again, the first teaching of Rabbi Chia was that if you have Hadas Eidim b'mixas, meaning you have a case where he denies everything, but then Eidim say he is chayiv some of it, he's chayiv, let's say 50 out of 100. So then according to Rabbi Chia, there's a shvu in that case as well. It doesn't have to be Moda b'mixas. It doesn't have to be where he admits to part of it. It could even be where there's Eidim that testify to part of it. That's what Rabbi Chia said. And we're now bringing a proof to that issue. The brisa that was taught by, again, the father of Rabbi Toriki says as follows, Mana li biyadcha. Person says, you owe me a money, you owe me 100 dinar, v'halo omer ein lach biyadi klum. The other one says, I don't know anything. V'idem idem oso sheyesh biyado 50 zuz. And then witnesses testify that he owes him 50 zuz. Exactly the case of the first Rabbi Chia. So here it says, Yachol yishav al hashar. I might think like Rabbi Chia. I might think that you take a shvu on the rest. Talmud Omer, the pasuk says, Al kol aveda asher yomar ki huzeh. It says it is ki huzeh. Again, ki huzeh is the pasuk of admitting part of it, but we understand from there, al hodoas pivat ha-mechayvo, that the person only takes a shvua if he admits, but there's no shvua if the Eidim are the ones that testify about part of it. And so therefore we have a question directly on what Rabbi Chia said. The Gemara says to that, Masnisa Koramis Aled Rabbi Chia, you're asking from a Braisa and Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia Tanahu Polig, Rabbi Chia is considered like a Tana. He can argue with a Braisa. This Braisa does go against Rabbi Chia, but that's not a problem. But the Gemara says, but the problem is that this Braisa brings a Pasuk. Rabbi Chia can't go against a Pasuk. And the Gemara answers simply, Yahu Lamoda Mixas Hatayna. The Pasuk just means that there's a Shvua by Moda Mixas. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is no Shvua if you have Hadoas Eidim Mixas. And the Gemara continues, Ve'avua de Rav Toriki. Now the father of Rav Toriki, what does he say about the pasuk? Amar Lach, he'll say to you, Ksiv hu uksiv zeh. There are 2 parts of the pasuk. It says the word hu and it says the word zeh. Chad l'moda mixas hatayna. One is talking about moda b'mixas, meaning by there where there's an admission to partial. There's a partial admission rather. V'chad l'hadoas edim. And then the other pasuk is to tell you that by hadoas edim, that if you have edim that testify in partial, the potter, that it's potter in that case. In other words, you have one that actually comes to include the case of moda b'mixas, but then you have an additional pasuk to say only over there, and not if you have hadoas eidim b'mixas. The idach and the other one responds to that, meaning Rabbi Chia will respond to that. Chad lemoda mixas hatayna. One is to tell you the idea of moda b'mixas. The chad lemoda min hatayna. And the other one is to say that the admission, when you do that partial admission, it has to be from the same species, so to speak, from the same type of the original claim. You can't admit to something else. V'idach, but the other opinion, again, the father of Rav Toriki, he responds to that, Moda mimin hataina lesla. He doesn't even hold of this idea of Moda mimin hataina. You don't have to admit from the same type that is being claimed, because V'savar la Rebbe Gamliel, because he holds like Rebbe Gamliel, the Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Tanu chitin v'hodelo besoron, exactly this kind of case. Let's say the claim is wheat and the admission is barley, so it's a machlokas tanoim. That's not mimin hataina. The Tanakama says potter, he's potter from a shvu in that case because it's not mimin hataina. Rebbe Gamliel mechayev, and Rebbe Gamliel says chayev, and Rebbe Gamliel, that's the shita that the father of Rav Toriki would follow. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. There was a certain shepherd. Every day they would give him animals to watch over, and they would give those animals in the presence of witnesses. Yom Echad, one day, they gave it over to him, but there were no witnesses. So at the end, Amar Lahu, he said to them, since there were no witnesses, he figured he could get out of it. He said, it never happened. I never got the animals. But also Sahadi, but then witnesses came, and Ashidu Bey, they actually testified against him, that he consumed two of them. And so the Gemara says to that, Amar Reb Zera says, Im Isa Rabbi Chia Kamaisa, if what the first Reb Chia said, if that is true, meaning if when you have Hadas, Eidim, and Mixas, you have to take a Shvua, that's exactly what's happening over here. The Eidim are testifying to part of it. So Mishtab Ashara, he would have to take an oath regarding the rest of the animals. It's exactly that case. But the Gemara says, 1 second, Amar Le Abaya said to him, Im Isa, Mishtaba, you're saying that if it's true, he should take an oath? That can't be true in this particular case, Gazlanu, because here, what they're testifying to renders him a Gazlan, he's a thief. They're saying, Da'achal Tarti Minayu, they're saying that they saw that he consumed two of them, and if he's a Gazlan, he's not trusted to take a Shavua. So even if in general we hold of Rabbi Chia Kamaisa, here he wouldn't take a Shavua because he's a Gazlan. So Amar Le, so he said back to him, Shekenegdo Koamina. What I mean to say is, when you have a situation where the person who's supposed to take the Shavua can't take a Shavua because he's not trusted, so then the opposite litigant takes the Shavua instead, and that's what would happen over here. The people who gave over the animals to the shepherd, they would take the Shavua instead of the shepherd. And the Gemara continues, Hashtanami, but now also, the lesser Rabbi Chia, even if we don't hold of what Rabbi Chia said, let's say there is no Shavua by Hadoas Eidim and Mixas, but Nechayv Midar of Nachman, we should still say is Chayv Shavua because of what Rav Nachman said, and again, he's not trustworthy, so the Shavua is going to go to the opposite litigant. But what did Rav Nachman say? The Tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah, Mana li biyadcha ein lecha biyadi pater. The halacha is if a person says you owe me a mana, and the other one says I don't owe you anything, in general you're supposed to be pater from a shvua. It's only when you admit partially that you take a shvua. However, there's a shvua derabanan. V'yamar Rav Nachman, what Rav Nachman said, mashabiyan also shvuas hesis, that he does have to take a shvuas hesis. So meaning to say we impose the shvua derabanan, literally shvuas hesis means it's an oath of incitement, and therefore just like Rav Nachman says there's a shvua there, so over here also forget about the mode of a mixas, forget about the hadas eidim and mixas, doesn't make a difference. You have shvuas hesis, and that shvuas hesis he can't take because he's a gazlan, so it should go to the opposite litigant. The Gemara says no, you can't say that because there Rav Nachman takanti, because even Rav Nachman in the first place, that's only a takana derabanan. The Gemara will go on to say you can't have a derabanan takana on another derabanan takana, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Hey Amud Beis.